Can you all hear me? Great. Good afternoon. Probably got the most interesting slot right after lunch. So let's see how this goes. What I wanted to do was talk a little bit about analytics and sciences and Flipkart. It'll be at a very high level. What I wanted to do was just talk about different areas, examples, how we think about it, and then I'll just have some Q&A. The purpose of this talk is to more than anything else, give a high-level overview. I'm assuming this is not the forum for a deep technical talk. So it's going to be at a different kinds of examples at a very high level, and maybe we can have other conversations offline after the talk if there are any areas where people want deeper context. Yeah. I think at least the plan is to somebody told me there's a buzzer at 45 minutes. Hopefully it won't be nearly as long. I think we can get to a Q&A session if this goes well, probably in 44 minutes or so, and then we can take it from there. Yeah. What I'm going to talk about, this was a topic I made up in like 5 seconds. So I don't know. Basically, what I'm going to talk about is the kind of work we do at Flipkart. I think obviously there'll be components of growth and consumer experience because these are the two things that for us are very important at Flipkart. So I think that's going to be one area. Definitely these two areas will be covered. From an agenda perspective, I'll talk a little bit about Flipkart and then three key pieces, right? I'll talk a little bit about data, just data in Flipkart, what kind of data we get, and just a very quick example. Then I'll talk a little bit about, we have two areas. One is analytics, which is to drive business decisions. It's less to do with the skill set and so on. Both means analytics, data science, all of these have statisticians, analytical people, all kinds of things. But the focus of analytics is going to be for business decisions and data science for systemic intelligence. So that's how I'm going to talk about it. So talk a few examples about analytics, what we do, and then the driving systemic intelligence as well. Flipkart. About Flipkart, just about e-commerce in general, has been growing at 34% CAGR for the last 5-6 years, and it's around 16.4 billion USD in 2014. I think it's supposed to close around by 2020 to be close to $100 billion, something like that. These are the key players in e-commerce all over the world. Means I think. Between these, the revenue is probably, the sum of this revenue is probably a pretty big chunk of the world's e-commerce. US is still growing very fast, right? Then I'll talk a little bit about e-commerce in India, right? India, it's around to grow another 50 to 70 billion in the next 5 years. And China at this point is just red hot. And one interesting thing about e-commerce in India, why are people investing like this in e-commerce and just keep Flipkart and specific companies aside, right? Talk about e-commerce in general in India, right? One of the things that you're seeing in e-commerce, right? E-commerce is probably really speeded up since 2009, 2010 time frame, last 5 years or so, right? And if you look at least in the metros, the share of wallet. So for example, I spent the last till 2010, I was in the US from 1990 to 2010, and Amazon came in around 95 or so. And even by 2010, e-commerce as a share of your wallet was a minuscule single percentage points for most people. And what is promising about both India and China, and particularly India, given the two major things, right? So if you look at it, there are two things about retail that is important to people. One is selection, the other is service, right? If you look at your brick, why is e-commerce especially well positioned in India? My own sort of thought process around this is two major reasons, right? One is the fact that sort of infrastructure is pretty poor. It's not easy to get from point A to point B fairly easily, right? And so e-commerce offers that, and even within a store, right? It's not like these are so spacious that if you've been to a big bazaar or something like that on a Sunday evening or a Saturday evening, you literally cannot walk through that place, right? It's just, I think second piece is selection. Even in big hypermarkets, super hyper duper, whatever they call them, right? Whatever markets, selection is fairly limited, right? Whereas if you go to a Costco in the US, you have incredible amount of selection, or a Target or whatever, selection is more. So the point is selection and service, the two things that are important for any consumer, right, of retail is both a problem to be solved for in India, and that e-commerce gives the opportunities to solve for those problems. And along with that, the infrastructure getting from point A to point B, right? So the net, the point is that there is an opportunity for e-commerce to be a far greater share of, and you're already seeing that. In 5 years, the share of wallet that e-commerce has taken, it took sort of in India, it took probably, particularly in metro in India, but now it's going to tier 2, tier 3 cities and so on and so forth. It probably took like decades in the US too. And even then, I don't think the share of wallet they've taken is as big. So that's a big story of e-commerce. Some very quick insights. A few things: internet users in India, internet penetration as a percentage of population. If you look at it, we are still a long way in India. So the opportunity to grow is tremendous. And that is going to happen through mobile. That 19% is going to something bigger through mobile as you move towards the tier 2, 3 cities in India, right? And if you look at it, the other thing is internet users, right? And that's the mobile revolution that's actually happening, right? If you look at this was what, 1/3 here. It's more than half here. And so if you look at this box growing, it's growing much faster than this box, right? And that's, again, due to smartphone and mobile penetration and the ability to sort of have internet in the real, means the, what you call the real India, the sort of where a lot of the sort of this thing masses, right? And the other piece is, this is the demographics which is going to be spending over the years. And that demographics, again, is very sort of, the point is, right, while this is a very small percentage, I think there's a promise that it's going to be huge. Smartphones, these are some statistics, monthly app downloads, then the desktop users, mobile users, and the interesting part about only mobile, right, is this has changed in the last 10 months or 12 months to be bigger than that, right? Yeah, and that's the transaction volumes. So now a little bit about Flipkart, and then after that, so it's a company with around 30 million products, 70 plus categories, so on. So you can read most of it. Key piece is 60 million registered users, and it's a we have around 33,000 employees at this point. Yeah, so that's a summary. Now, a little bit about data, right? Our scale. What's our scale? We generate around, actually the last time I gave a talk, this was in NASCOM 3-4 months back, or I don't know how long back. I got the same slide from our data platform team, and it said 2.5 or 3 terabytes. So, and right now it's 6.5 terabytes a day. So one of the things is we are getting many more streams of data feeding in, and so our real problem, I'll tell you, right, while it's really cool to talk about sort of machine learning and sort of deep learning, blah, 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 so on and so forth, the real story, and any of the companies of the large scale, right, the Facebooks and Googles of the world, one of the things they'll tell you is the bigger problem is the ability to deal with scale, not algorithm complexity. If you're able to deal with scale, I think this is the value to be had, this is probably what is driven by algorithmic complexity, and this is probably what is by scale. At this point of time, these things can change. So what I'm saying is not a sort of a universal reality or something like that. There'll be a point of time, maybe 10 years, 5 years, 20 years from now, where systemic intelligence is where all the value is going to be created. But at this point of time in history, I think dealing with scale is a huge problem, and that's probably and when I say dealing with scale, it's not about how many terabytes or whatever, right? Those problems are the easier ones to solve. It's every day new streams of data get defined. See, for example, as sort of somebody in the analytics organization in Flipkart, for me, the biggest thing is as we move, right? If you are in a really fast growth company like Flipkart or any other sort of fast growing company, your strategy itself is evolving as at a really, really fast clip. You are pivoting again and again and again. And it's true of a lot of valley companies as well, right? You're pivoting. So like a year and a half back, we were a retailer. 8 months back, we pivoted to a platform. 4 months back, we are pivoting to be much more mobile centric, right? Each one of these completely shakes up everything I need to do, everything my team needs to do, everything the analytics team needs to do. Because the problems you're solving are different. The problems that are most important for the company are different. The data that needs to be used is different. Some of this is not even instrumented. You start instrumenting some of these and start generating data on these and start. So that's the real challenge. If you look at it, what is the analytical challenge? It is, as you look at, means it's probably the most sort of mundanely used word is big data or whatever. But the reality is the ability to be able to pivot again and again and again and again and still be able to create value is the biggest challenge that you will face as an analytics organization in any fast growth, high data organization, high data volume, fast growth organization, right? So that's the real challenge if you had to summarize all this, 900 data streams, like 450 terabytes processed a day, and so on and so forth. Right? So what does this data mean? It's that we have a view of the country, not just the commerce in the country, right? So think about what are the opportunities that exist when this kind of data exists. See, today you look at it as what can a retailer do or what can a marketplace do, so on and so forth, right? The reason you have the opportunity to pivot again and again in different businesses is the kind of data we are generating is a very, very sort of unique set or a very, very interesting set that gives you a depth of understanding of the Indian consumer, or not just the Indian consumer, it's the Indian in many ways, right? So this is sort of reading preferences, right? It's more than just consumption, right? It's not just, it's reading preferences in different parts of the country, right? Similarly, so this is an interesting one, right? What kind of heels preference there are in different parts of the country, right? Purchase patterns within Bangalore. Where are people buying high value stuff? Where are they buying low value stuff? Where are they buying lots of stuff? Where are they buying less amount of stuff? Anywhere in sort of we could do this in any metro, any place, right? Literally, right? This Mumbai, right? So now, so that's so the point is just looking at data. Right, looking at data at that scale gives you a bunch of insights about the Indian consumer and the Indian, which is very, very unique. Right? Then looking at how do you use this, right? So this is the analytics. Key areas of interest. So the organization itself has multiple different areas, right? Groups, right? You have marketing, consumer analytics, growth analytics. So marketing customer looks at your classic marketing, what kind of segments, what are they buying, what are the different cohorts, how are they behaving, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Can I predict who will be my high value customer very early, right? The earlier I can predict who my high value customer is going to be, the more I can sort of look at some of those, right? Growth, right? How do I drive growth, right? Revenue growth, where is it going to come from? Where are the next set of consumers coming from? So on and so forth. seller marketplace analytics. Again, now we are a marketplace. That has very interesting set of problems. Who should be our sellers? How do you scale sellers? Should we go for really high value? Means, should we go for a small number of sellers who sell a lot, or lots of sellers who sell a little, or a mix of both? What should it be? Who will grow? Who will not grow? Why are some sellers engaged? Why are some sellers not engaged? Fraud, risk, all kinds of things. How is my seller ecosystem impacting my consumer experience? All kinds of things. Supply chain, right? Supply chain. So one of the key metrics we measure is something called a perfect order, right? Everything should go right in an order. That's a perfect order, which is it should be sort of, we promise it should be delivered in X days, it should be delivered less than X days. If there are returns, that's a problem. If there are complaints, that's a problem. Everything. So how many of our orders are perfect orders, right? So now to make that happen is a huge analytical problem, because you have all kinds of, you have a supply chain itself that needs to get simulated. Again, there are multiple permutations and combinations. You have your own warehouse, which is sort of, there is some population for which you're fulfilling from your own inventory, some population you're filling with sellers, some population you're using your own supply chain logistics, some population you're using a third-party logistics. Each one has to be simulated, optimized, and you have to come up with what we call an orchestration, right, which is something we need to build through analytical solutions and models and so on. Price and demand modeling, right? Pricing and demand modeling. So how do you sort of maximize revenue? What is the right pricing construct, so on and so forth. Risk and fraud analytics. Here again, risk and fraud can be from a buyer side or the seller side, right? You can have a risk and fraud a buyer side where they give some false addresses, or they sort of, there are a bunch of use cases. And again, seller side, it could be false reviews, review ratings. You're trying to game the system to make yourself appear higher in the ranking, so on and so forth, right? Because at the end of the day, we have a platform which algorithmically determines what seller should get surfaced up based on their historical performance, how they have done in the past, the quality of their products, so on and so forth, right? So there are always, like any algorithm, as you're building algorithms, there is somebody who's trying to break that to sort of come up on top, even though they may not be the right people who should come up on top. So how do you break that, right? Mobile analytics, this is a very important area for us, right? How do you drive, how do you first of all measure experience? How do you drive experience? How do you understand what are the sort of things that need to keep improving in our app, and so on and so forth, right? Customer service and experience analytics, again, looking at our customers are all over. They are in social media, they are in call centers, they write reviews, blah, blah, blah. Based on that, getting a very clear view of what's working, what's not working, what's driving customer experience, what's not, what needs to change. Business and category analytics, these are basically supporting various analytical groups in the company, business groups in the company, helping them helping them build selection, helping them with saying what kind of selection they need to have. So if you're the leader who's running home and furniture, the analytical solution should be able to, based on a bunch of different parameters of demand modeling and so on and so forth, be able to say what's available, what should be available in a selection. We do it crawl, competitive sort of those things, and figure out what needs to be available, how good should our selection be, and so on and so forth, right? Business, HR analytics, again, just looking at employees, attrition, things of that nature. How do you improve selection process? How do you improve satisfaction, so on and so forth, and a bunch of other areas. But the point is, analytics, see, we are an internet company, so for us, data, all our decisions, there are no decisions where some three senior leaders sit and they just have some conversation, yeah, this looks like a nice thing to do, and so on. There's nothing like that, right? In Flipkart, there's nothing. You come to a meeting without data, you're toast, right? There's nothing. You can't go to a serious meeting with saying, hey, I feel like, let me do this. This seems like a great decision because of some random reason. Nothing works like that. So that puts tremendous amount of pressure on the analytics organization, because decision making is fundamentally driven by this, right? So in fact, there was a earlier earlier, there was a panel discussion I was having at some point, and there were a bunch of other companies who were talking about how do you evangelize analytics to the leadership and make them adopt and so on and so forth. That was half the panel, and then I just couldn't relate to that panel because for me the demand side is not the problem, the supply side is the problem, right? At the end of the day, it's like I am able to sort of do maybe 50% of what I should be doing actually, right? So I think it's a very different problem, and I'm sure anybody who's in any sort of fast-growing, successful internet company, that's the case. There's nothing special about Flipkart, right? So one area where we've done a lot of work, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time in each one of these. I'm just trying to keep to the time, right? One area we did a lot of work on was customer segmentation, right? So first thing is, how do you look at customers, right? So two areas we look at customers. One is engagement, the other is spend, right? Spend is the more obvious one. Why not just spend? Why not just spend? Because spend is a very skewed measure. It depends on sort of your life stage. It specifically depends on what you're trying to do. You might just buy a TV and your spend would be sort of 80,000-90,000 rupees. You bought a big TV and that puts you in a high spend bracket, but you're not really engaging a lot with Flipkart. So those are two dimensions that we are looking at, and we look at, and engagement itself has a very nuanced way how we look at it. And based on these profiles, then we start building our entire segmentation profiles in this framework, and then look at how do you acquire, engage, grow, retain, monetize to maximize value, right? And then we have a bunch of solutions for each one of these things. For example, engagement itself is sort of a combination of how much you buy, frequency, a diversity of spend. So that's a very important point. It's like an RFM. It's sort of a proxy for an RSM, kind of like an RFM, but it's a little bit different, right? Because what we are trying to do is drive a lot of engagement in the app, have a lot of diversity of spend, and have them sort of buy frequently, right? So what we want to do is we want to have people think of Flipkart. If they want to do commerce, we want them to think about us, right? And so based on this, this is essentially how we segment our customers. And then based on that, we have a bunch of different ways by which we would engage with our customers. And sort of in acquisition, we would identify the right channels, which are acquiring the right kind of customers. We build lookalike models to the registered user base and see, okay, these are our high-value customers, but in our registered user base, there's a bunch of lookalikes who look like this. Why are they not high-value customers? And then we start building sort of targeting solutions around that. And then through customer research, we do sort of cluster analysis, understand what these segments really mean, right? So there are three components to it. One is all the statistical modeling and stuff. The other is actual business problem statement, problem solving. The third piece that also is part of the analytics organization is research, right? So which is essentially going out there, understanding the customers and so on and so forth, right? Then engaging, measure sort of engagement, right? So engagement, the key thing we are trying to figure out is what are drivers of engagement early that are going to predict that somebody is going to be a high-value customer. So we have a bunch of models around how do you predict a high-value customer early so that we are able to over-invest in them and so on. Grow and retain, obviously you grow the right ones and sort of retain. Definitely high engagement, high spend. Retention is a key piece. High engagement, low spend. How do you sort of upsell to them, increase cross-category purchases, things of that nature, right? And in the low engagement, low spend, our core focus will be who are these people who look just like your high engagement, high spend, but they're not spending, then how do you target them, right? So those are the things. And then monetizing, a bunch of other solutions for monetizing as well, right? Then we look at each of our channel. What is the mix? Not just a mix of cost of acquisition and value of customer, but we look at cost of acquisition for each channel, but also look at what quality of customers that come in. Then again, we look at things like, let us say we have multiple things. Maybe we had a sale event, maybe a promotion, blah, 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 so on and so forth. How good is the quality of customers we are acquiring through those events? relative to a business as usual, right? Then again, like this is a sort of a predictive model which essentially has a very good ability to predict within 2 weeks who is going to be our high value customer, right? Your top 2 deciles are right. You're able to predict with a sort of 95% accuracy, right? That there's going to be a high value customer. So those are some of the areas where then again, once they come in, they're coming in. Now I'm looking at it from our property or business perspective. What are key drivers of conversion, right? How does what's important? Are sale days important? Is it important to sort of look at competition, things of that nature, right? Then last piece is how do you drive systemic intelligence, right? Now this is so far we looked at what kind of data. Just from data, looking at data, what can you glean? Then second, some deeper analytics and statistical modeling to drive certain set of behavior, so on and so forth. But if you look at it, what I talked about is more for driving business decisions. Now, how do you leverage science to drive more systemic intelligence, right? So those are some of the examples, right? So areas of interest here: personalization, recommendation, review mining, address classification. I'll tell you why that is. Demand elasticity modeling, user insights engine, social pulse, discovery, image processing, pattern recognition, fraud prevention, so on and so forth. Yeah. So here, look at a seller. So one of the things, right? Why is seller rating so important? One of the reasons seller rating is important is because basically what happens with the seller rating is our discovery, right? Our discovery solution algorithm will sort of look at, so if you typed in blue shoes, then it'll look for blue shoes, then it'll look at all the sellers, and then it'll sort of figure out who are the best sellers through multiple there's a seller quality, seller defect score, and so on, and based on that, you sort of are the person who, you're the seller who surfaces up the most, right? The highest, right? So it's very important for sellers to sort of within their, so there is a healthy competition between sellers in driving better selection, better quality, so on and so forth, and to make sure that they are the ones who surface up earlier. And as they drive more and more high quality transactions, the probability of their getting surfaced up becomes higher and higher. And so those are the right reasons how the seller should compete. However, there is what can happen is something like this, right? Basically, a seller ratings is another thing, right? Ratings is one of the key drivers of the seller quality model, right? One of the things, right? Now, but then what can somebody do? And because ratings is completely democratized, it is crowdsourced. You're rating a bunch of the people who are actually the end consumers are rating these sellers. And if you are highly rated by the consumers, you should have all the right to surface up highest so that more consumers can take advantage of you. But the problem with that, there are two problems with that, right? So one I won't talk about now. One is, how do you get a really good seller who's coming new into the system to sort of surface up? That's where our ad product helps, right? So you have the opportunity, if you are a good seller and you meet all our quality criteria, to be able to advertise and be sort of one of the sellers who appears in the search. But then one of the things that can happen for some sellers is they can start sort of doing rating, sort of gaming the rating system, right? So I can be a seller, I can log in as 10 different users, and then I can start sort of giving 1 to all my competitors and 5 to all sort of myself, and I can buy small things and do that. That's a thing. So how do you discover that? So we have some solutions where we sort of have built sort of graphs like these where the edges are sort of A rating B and so on and so forth. And these are groups of people who are together rating the same set of people. So what you see there is essentially a group of users rating the same set of sellers, and which is quite likely that, so it's not very likely that you have sort of 5 users all rating the same set of sellers again and again and again, and sort of driving a high sort of rating to one seller and making everybody else one, right? So it's looking for patterns such as these to sort of drive understanding of seller fraud, and then we can take action against those sellers. Then another thing is price extraction from catalog images, right? So here the problem that you're solving is sometimes what can happen is, see, that's the thing about, see, when you're running a retail, you have ability to control all the inventory, manually do everything. But when you go to a marketplace, you have to build deep technologies to build the same quality and this thing metrics that you would build as a as a retailer, right? So in this case, you could have sellers who just say MRP is $7.99 and then they say it's $3.99, but then you get it, you realize that the MRP right there is $3.99, right, actually, right? So how do you detect things like this, right? So one of the things we do is, this is where some of our image processing algorithms and so on are leveraged. And this is a very complex problem because a few things, right? You have to read that thing automatically at scale, and it's a curved surface. You can have waviness, you can have different fonts, so on and so forth. So a whole bunch of things are exist, right? So that's sort of the images themselves are so you rotation. So the 399 may not be flat; it may be tilted like this, undulation, the curvature, so on and so forth, right? And so there's a whole bunch of processing that is done to sort of thresholding, converting it to a grayscale, thresholding it, and so on and so forth, and then finally getting out the core text, and then doing a bunch of doing some supervised machine learning to actually come and with some decent level of confidence be able to determine what the numbers are, right? So these are some of the key challenges, right? The scale. First thing is, it's not like something that can be done manually, right? You have 70 million or whatever, right? Number of, so rotated, unaligned images, how do you deal with that? So it requires some fairly sophisticated mathematics, right? Undulated characters due to curvature of the sandal, complex texture, partial digit characters, highly unbalanced, very sparse, right? So these are some of the things, right? Automatic scale and image alignment. Need specific modeling effort to develop. So that's the core part, right? You need to have a very, very good model to be able to recognize the digit through machine learning to be able to account for all of these things. And so, yeah. Another example is basically address classification, right? Here the typical scenario is you have a delivery hub, you're trying to sort. It's a very, very manually intensive process to read the address and say, particularly in India, right? Because we don't have a standardized address process. It's a lot of other countries have very standardized address. This thing where first you have the apartment number, then you have the street, then you have city, zip code, state. It's very clearly this thing. We don't have like that, right? I just moved to a new house. I have a long story. It's almost like writing a story. It's number 71, Kasavanahalli, Hosa Road, near Jail Road, near Amrita College, near Sarjapur Road, next to post office, opposite to store, and then finally a number, right? So how do you deal with those kind of, actually there are, so I'll give you the actual data, right? You see addresses with 75, 80 characters. There are even addresses over 100 characters, right? How do you do that? And that's another very interesting machine learning problem. So things like number of words in address range from 4 to 75, leaving outliers to even 100, like apartments is spelled in 263 different ways, Whitefield is spelled 24 different ways. Interest, this is actual data. We are not, this is not an exaggeration here, right? Bangalore, and I still don't know, I have to check out, like my data science guys gave me this. I didn't know 161 ways, how do you spell Bangalore? I have to still figure it out. Even the combinatorial, this thing doesn't add up, but I'm sure that's true though, right? In fact, I had one slide with the Bannerghatta Road spelled like some 60 different ways. I had one, or some huge number. Structure and address is lacking, right? And then there are some Kua and this and that, and next to the column and things, all kinds of things, words that you have never seen anywhere, right? So then basically here you have a sub-area list. So basically you're trying to, what are you trying to do? You're trying to take this and automatically sort it and say this is the delivery field executive for this sub-area. So you take these packages. To do this automatically adds tremendous value if you are able to do it well, right? Through machine learning. Today, otherwise you will have to sit and sort it, right? Today it's a mix. There's some level of sorting is done where the confidence of the model is below. Keep improving the model, right? So you have a sub-area list and labeled addresses. Luckily, our field executives, they take in, so you get a lot of labeled data, right, for machine learning, right? So then, because you have these addresses, and then you have the field executive, and the field executive can label the data as is this sub-area, blah, 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 so on and so forth, right? Because very often what happens is you give it to that guy, and he goes around, doesn't know where this thing is, and because earlier, I faced the pain, like I buy a lot from, obviously from Flipkart as well, right? So, so what happens is earlier I used to live in Koramangala, Raheja, everybody knows where that is. The minute the guy won't even ask, he'll just show up and thing. Right now I moved to a new house, a little bit interior, and now I have to I have to explain to the guy how to get here and so on and so forth. So those kinds of things can be actually solved by machine learning. These are all very real problems, right? So the core thing, right? So then basically this gives you how you do that. So basically the core is you have a business driven by data analytics and science, and the key point is this is this thing where you're solving this is what I love about what we do from a data science, analytics, and all of these perspectives is this is a business, and this is true for any internet business, right? You are solving through very deep, like take the previous one, right? Very deep mathematics, or the image one and so on. Very deep mathematical modeling and statistics and analytics and so on and so forth. You're solving problems that are very real, very real, and they can actually change the business in a very tangible manner. And that's not true for most businesses, because most businesses, the reason I was in that panel discussion, and obviously I'm not going to specify companies and so on, but they're talking about how do you evangelize sort of analytics and data science to the management, is because it's not easy to create this kind of very tangible value. When you are able to, in any business, right, if you're able to, you take any sort of internet business, this is probably true. So it's nothing special in this case. But what I'm saying is, when you have a business where the evangelizing is unnecessary, when you have a business where you actually are able to actually change the business with data, I don't think you need to evangelize. Eventually, sort of the company will be run by a group of sort of people who care about data, right? Because it's a selection bias, it's Darwinian. Like businesses are very Darwinian. They will evolve towards success. There are certain businesses which do not benefit enormously greatly with data. There you will keep on evangelizing to the management, but then the management itself will not be very data savvy, because the evolution has taken care of that, right? While there are other businesses like any of these, like a Facebook or a Google or whatever it is, right, where the evolution has taken care of the fact that you can only build this business with data. So that's basically it. That's it. Nobody had to buzz, correct? Right? Yeah. 40 minutes. So we can, I have 15 more minutes, I think, right? 20 minutes, cool. So, yeah. Yeah.
One question I have is, when you really had to, like, every 6 months, shift your pivot, as you're saying, getting in the company, how do you juggle between the technology and the...
It's very difficult.
What are the two key things you will share?
Okay, I'll tell you two key things. Number one key thing, which is probably the answer for anything, is people. You need the right kind of people. You need the kind of, that's the number one thing, and that's so far the number one thing that the second thing is even, I mean, I have to think about the second thing, which is way far. Because you have to have, you cannot be in these kind of companies, right? Right, and given this thing forum, I'm not specifically talking about I'm talking about a fast growth, successful internet company, right? Any company, you have to be very sort of, you have to have a group of people who are very agile and innovative on a day-to-day basis, right? So for example, what do I mean by that, right? So for example, there are certain entities that have not been created in the platform. You have to figure out what are substitutes, what are ways to proxy for some of those entities, but you still have some other entities. How do you combine these? How do you actually build a model that can actually drive a decision? How do you do an analysis that can actually drive a decision with what is existing? So the number one thing is having people who have that, who are culturally fit to be very nimble and agile. That's by far the number one thing. If you have a bunch of people who are not nimble and agile, you can do whatever else you want. Will not go anywhere, right? So that's the number one thing. So the number two thing is very deep acumen about what's important, what's not from a data perspective, right? If you are waiting for that magical table to be created that has all the rows and columns that you need, you should work for a different company, right? Because that's not going to happen in any of these fast-paced companies, right? So the key lessons I would say is agility, and the second thing is ability to sort of have a very, very deep, intuitive thinking around data.
But it's very well integrated or tied up with the technology, which is again very high.
Correct. Yeah. So that's why we have people called architects, right? It's their job to actually understand, create the right amount of flexibility in the platform, right? So again, I know that these are all questions which don't have a straight one yes or a no answer, right? But what do successful platforms do? How do successful platforms behave? They have the ability to be more flexible than other platforms. So how did a Salesforce succeed, whereas you had how many? Siebel. What was the difference between a Salesforce and Siebel? It was exactly these things, right? If you architected a platform well for being more flexible to a larger group of people, it succeeds. If you have to buy Siebel for $10 million and then spend $250 million to implement it, then you fail because it lacks flexibility, right? So those are the key. The concepts are not any different. The concepts have remained the same, which is have flexibility, have the agility, have the ability to sort of evolve quickly. And the point I'm trying to make is there are two components to that. The people should be like that and the platform should be like that. Yes.
What is the typical life cycle of a data science product? I mean, so is there any language of choice in which you prototype and then productize it something?
Yeah. So this, see, the life cycle is still not that quick, right? So you're talking about at least any of these things taking 2 to 3 quarters, right? So again, that's where we have these three different things, right? The analytics piece is much more here and now, where you're able to actually, so the analytics piece is much more, that's where the key difference is. Both of these use some sophisticated methodologies, techniques, and so on. The analytics piece is to drive actual decision, we separate it out. Then the science piece is much more integrated with engineering, where you have to actually productize it, to systemize it, and so on and so forth. That life cycle is a few quarters.
I had one question,
yes.
more specific to user identification. Say for instance, if I log into Flipkart, unless I'm at the cart and I give my username password, are you able to identify me as a user?
Most of the people today with see, that's where we, to be honest, in desktop we haven't invested a whole lot on that. But in mobile you have the device ID, right? So you are identified. On desktop we haven't invested because we were not it's not a huge priority for us to build a deep fingerprinting technologies and so on and so forth. So I don't think.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
In the e-commerce industry, where customer loyalty is a very critical and so far difficult to achieve criteria, how do you think analytics helps you solve that problem?
I thought that's what I talked about.
Yeah, and
first.
how does it give you a differentiating factor from the other competitors in the same space?
I think that's what I talked about, right? First 5 slides, right? How do you first identify who are a high value? Can you identify them early? Can you over-invest in them? It's the same thing.
Okay, and the other competitors that you have, do they also follow similar models?
I don't know. I don't really say this thing. In reality, right, the way what I believe is if you do the right thing for the consumer, they'll be loyal, right? If somebody else does, good luck to them also. But the point is, I think as a company, and this is true of any company, as a company, you don't sit here thinking about what your competitor will do. I don't think Steve Jobs ever thought about, oh, what will Samsung build while I'm building this and so on. He thinks about what is the best phone to build for the consumer, period. That's it. Once he builds that, yeah, competitors, if they are good enough, they can compete. Right? I'm sure that's how I would think. And yeah.
What is the real reason for Flipkart to switch to the complete mobile platform?
Oh my God, I've never gone to
There's
a
a
conference where somebody hasn't asked me this question.
There's a link thing. So
Yeah.
how has this change impacted you and your team? Are you having better nights, sleeping nights, or is it more new challenges? How's it?
No. Anyway, I don't want to answer the first piece. You can talk to somebody else for that. Then, yeah, one thing I will say is we are investing heavily in mobile, right? So obviously we are going to be mobile centric for sure, right? For example, why we are mobile centric is obvious. I showed you the data, right? The next generation of users are going to be 15 to 35. They are all mobile. The second piece about thing is the next generation of users are going to be tier 2, tier 3 cities, and most of them are never going to see a desktop. So high level, that's why we are mobile centric, right? Beyond that, I think that's this thing. From my perspective, I find for me that's great because one thing, right? See, I showed you about 900 data streams, blah, blah, this, that, and the more you are going to tell me this is my only choice or this is my primary choice, the better it is for me because it focuses my energy towards that, right? Today, I worry less about am I driving great promotions and am able to attract the right kind of customers on my desktop. I worry only about things. So to that extent, like any decision in a company, right? The more clarity you have on where they are going, the less work you have to do with more impact. It's the same thing.
Hello. It's a good, valuable session, sir, from you. I have a small question. So you talked about the kind of a decision sciences and a machine learning algorithms, the typical life cycle is 2 to 3 quarters. So what is the typical accuracy levels of these models after the 2 to 3 quarters of the investment? Because why I'm asking that question is there could be few models which would be running away and you would not be getting as expected as results from that. And what is the percentage where you call it as a good accuracy? And for example, could be a this address.
No, right. I don't think. See, if you're, are you familiar with machine learning in general, right? If you're familiar, it depends totally on the problem, right? You could have a very, very balanced data with 2 classes and you could have 95% accuracy. You could have a very unbalanced data, multi-class problem with all kinds of, where a 40% accuracy can give you a huge lift in your business. So model accuracy is very, very orthogonal to business value. Our focus is business value, right? So our focus is models that can give a lift or an ROI on what was there earlier. So for example, so the focus has less to do with machine learning. Take that example of that sorting address, right? If I am able to do it with 20% less manual resources, even if the model accuracy is 20%, it's still a great solution compared to another one which is a 90% accuracy, but I can guess the answer anyway, right? So
my question is like whether you'll be happy with 20 or you still try to reach a 40%.
No, we will try to reach, but I think it's like every other business decision, right? You will kind of figure out where diminishing returns are happening, and what you will do, usually what we would do is we'll have one deep researcher go continue looking at it to see if we can get a breakthrough for 1 or 2 more quarters. If they are not able to create a huge jump, then we sort of pull back, ask them to move on to, they'll know, right? See, the thing is, again, going back to your problem, right? Your question is a good one, but the solution to that is not put a threshold on this accuracy and so on. The solution to that is having the right kind of scientists in the organization. If you think about corporate research in US, it has come through a journey over I started my career, I'm older than most of you here, so started my career in the mid 90s after my PhD, right? And what I had seen of a corporate lab then and what it is today, science lab in a Google or a Facebook or so on, has come a huge way, right? You had the same bright people. You had the same kind of bright people in Bell Labs where they were winning Nobel Prizes while AT&T was going bankrupt, right? Whereas you have the same kind of people who are able to drive value into the business. So my point is, you want to be able to build a sort of group of scientists who have this innate understanding of what drives value. By that, I don't mean they come, get an MBA, start talking about business and so on. It is your classic understanding, being deep technically, but knowing what actually adds value and not. That's all. If there are people like that, they'll know when to switch over. They'll know when it's you're not going to get better at it. So again, the answer goes back to what I said earlier. It's about the people. Yep, thanks. Yes. You should go to our LinkedIn, look at all the senior leaders in Flipkart, you look at the profile, you kind of know the kind of people we hire, right? For us, that's one way to answer the question. The other way to answer the question is, for us, I'll tell you, there are a few things, right? Culturally, we are a company which is always saying this is not enough. It needs to be something more. That's something very deep in our culture. Our culture is not something where we just celebrate very easily. We do something, it looks really good, but then we say, no, that's not good enough. Let's move on. That's very fundamental to our culture. I think when you have that culture, what it does is, year over year, your talent keeps getting better and better. And that definitely is happening at Flipkart, and you will see that year over year, you will see the kind of talent that comes in is better and better. I wouldn't say better than, but I would say it's improving and the bar keeps going up. Yeah.
So what is it in comparison to competition?
I don't care actually. I don't know.
For eBay and others?
No idea. I don't know, because I don't know, it's not relevant to what I need to do. Oh, yeah, very. Okay, I'll tell you very simple, right? Every week, our leadership team, so every week when we meet, when our leadership team meets, we start out by looking at the data and the insights from that data to make any decision. Everything is so the meeting, this is the weekly meeting. I'm not talking about some big strategy thing. Every week we start when we are looking every Tuesday or whatever, whenever we have our leadership team get together, start out by what is called our scorecard, where you look at metrics and also drivers and look at if there are models, insights, whatever, all of this gets surveyed. In a very brief half an hour, we review a data view of the company before we start doing anything. I don't have very deep insight around answer to how it will evolve and so on and so forth. Businesses typically evolve in a very early growth phase, being highly competitive. Over a period of time, they become more collaborative, and that's. I would think this would be no different from that.
Is it largely only transaction data which you work with, or is it also research data?
Everything, research data. I have a research team as well.
Usage and attitude studies for your categories, etc.
Yes.
You stitch the data with the transaction
Yes, absolutely. We use research data as well. By research data, you mean like Nissan, IMRB, things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's why the analytics and the research team are,
That's a
yeah.
360 view of the
Yeah, that's a through 360 view. In fact, that's a great point, right? I'll just add to that, right? So we have, see, in the analytics itself, we have a customer analytics group, and then we have a customer analytics view, and then we have a research group, research view as well. And together is how the view of the customer itself is. Thanks. Yes.
Now, I mean, from whatever you're describing, there seems to be a huge buildup of fundamental analytics talent and knowledge. And normally it's felt that analytics is, class or business agnostic.
No, I didn't understand. Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
And I mean, you're doing a, hell a lot of research.
Right.
Maybe, but right now particular to your business. But do you think at a point of time this can transport to any other business, and therefore you would, develop something very proprietary?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Our goal is for data to be a very key IP for us to build a lot on top of. Yeah, absolutely. See, yeah, and I'm sure this is true of any internet business. Any internet business is not looking at its data from the perspective of the business they are in today, but also at what other ways there are to create IP and monetize it. Is that right? Yeah. No, we had to build the entire stack from scratch actually for a lot of it, right? Because again, technologically the problem is, and I'm sure Yahoo in its days, Google in its days, Facebook in its earlier days, all of them face the same thing, right? When you're growing at this scale and you're pivoting again and again, no vendor can keep up with the needs. So you do end up building most of your stack yourself, not because, see, all of these companies, and I can speak for some of these other Valley companies as well, right? All of us did not build our stack because we felt building is better than buying or anything like that. It is just that the options don't exist because you are growing at a scale, changing, your needs are evolving, and it has to be, there are two reasons, right? One is the scale, the speed. The third is our entire IP is going to be on data. So what else is there? So if you think about any internet company, right? What else is there other than data that can differentiate you? There is absolutely nothing else. Everything else can be copied in two agile scrums or whatever, right? It doesn't take if it's just a product feature, you can build. See, think about even something as amazingly innovative as an iPhone. Today, you take any Samsung, forget Samsung, right? There are like some 3,000 mobile companies which built all the product features. The only thing you can't build is, can you replicate Google's user profile? You cannot, right? So that's the only IP that exists today. All right, thank you. I heard the buzzer as well.